We're so glad for you to be with us today. I'm hoping that you had a good few weeks off, and I'm so glad that you're able to join us. We are having another exciting conversation today. Again, we're talking about the future of praise and worship music. Now, last time we spoke about this, we had Stephen Lewis with us from Canada Christian College, sharing from an academic viewpoint. And now we have two other people from two different other colleges and universities as well that are going to be joining us. But before I introduce them, I'd like to introduce my co-host, Dale Borland. Dale.
Well, hello and welcome once again to GMIHub Online. We're so grateful that you tuned in. Tonight is an amazing conversation. It's kind of an extension. We're kind of part 3 because this is information that we know that you want to hear about. The future of praise and worship music. Where's it going? What's happening? And we're talking to educators here that are taking students that are learning the process of praise and worship leadership and taking it into the field. So, hey, if you know much about the GMI Hub and you want to know more, maybe go to gmihub.ca. That's our website, gmihub.ca. And if you go on there, you'll see some pretty interesting, really cool things. We also have an opportunity for you to receive our Hub Happening. Now, our Hub Happening is a monthly newsletter which goes out every month to those of you who have gone in and sent us your email. All you're going to simply do is go onto the gmihub.ca, scroll down till you get to the Hub Happening, click on there, and give us your email, and we'll be able to send it to you every month. So you can kind of know what's going on. And if you're a promoter or you're an artist and you've got an upcoming event or you've got a song you just released and you want us to share that with our viewership, all you got to do is let us know. Let us know, give us permission to tell them, and we will make sure we help promote what's happening in your music, and just want to be a blessing to you. Also, if this is your first time visiting on our YouTube channel, please subscribe. If you've already been here before, thank you so much for joining us again. Don't forget to click that like and the bell for notification, and that way you'll know the next time we up video. Thank you so much for joining us. Back over to Cheryl.
Well, we said that on February 7th that we were going to make an announcement, and the announcement is today is the day. Today is the day where we are going to start accepting song submissions for our next compilation album, the Christmas compilation volume 3. You'll be seeing more announcements about that. But before we go into that, we want to introduce our panelists that are patiently waiting to share their thoughts.
Yes.
Okay. So first up, I'd like to introduce Dr. Melissa Davies. Dr. Melissa is from Tyndale University. She is actually the director of the worship and arts program there. She has been in a worship leading role. She's done worship leading for over 20 years. She's basically been doing that within the GTA as well as abroad. So she has a wide experience with regards to worship, not just here in Canada, but internationally too. So it'll be so great to hear her viewpoints. And I think right now, you just recently did some presentations with the Power Up Conference. Is that right? Or is that coming up?
It's coming up, actually. Looking forward to that.
It's coming up.
Another few weeks.
Yes. So she's going to be on the Power Up Conference as well. So welcome, Dr. Melissa. I'm so glad you were able to join us.
Thank you for having me.
And we're also thrilled to have, all the way from Saskatchewan, from Briercrest College or Bible College, we have Geoff Dresser, who's the assistant music and arts professor of that school. Am I correct in saying that?
Assistant professor of worship arts is what they call me.
Of worship arts. Okay. Assistant professor of worship arts. What's thrilling about Geoff is not only is he an experience in worship leading, but he's also a recording artist, and he's been nominated for a couple of Covenant Awards as well. Pardon my stuttering, but we're so thrilled to have you, Geoff. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
It's awesome. Okay, so the first thing we want to talk about are trends. Now, what I really am excited about is we're going to hear about trends not just in Canada, but all across, like everywhere. So that's my very first question. What trends are you actually seeing in praise and worship today, or worship in churches today, or just trends? What are you seeing?
There's definitely a trend in not only the worship music itself, the style of music, but also in the behavior of worship teams and worship leaders and in attire. It's a whole package. Our worship culture, North American worship culture now, is popularly based around the sort of rock band, 5-piece, 4-piece band with lighting and contemporary sounds. We're looking at people dressing in certain attire, and then also just the idea of music being not sort of dominated by the voice, but instruments and voice coming together in a larger sort of band-like structure that I think that's quite different from trends we've seen in the past, with a solo worship leader leading the congregation in a more with accompaniment, maybe a piano accompanying only, and one person sort of spearheading that ministry. But I'm thinking about now a lot of worship teams and dynamic people on stage delivering a certain sound and a certain feel. So we're looking at style dominating the worship scene, typically in that sort of rock style, communicated through the music, through the instruments and through the vocals and the attire. So we're seeing it as like a whole package, I would say.
Yeah, I definitely think that there is that image is now a big part of the expectation for people who are leading worship. And I mean, you look at if you sort of look at the big five, I refer to them as like Bethel and Elevation, Hillsong, Jesus Culture, and Passion. I mean, all of those worship leaders, carefully take care of their image. They're all on social media, and so the students that I get coming in see, they're immersed in social media, and that expectation that worship leaders have a certain image is definitely there. And I don't see it in just my students, but yeah, there's definitely a whole culture around leading worship that I think includes what Melissa said, that the attire, you dress a certain way, you act a certain way, and it does mimic the kind of the rock star, that rock concert culture. If you just Google, if you do a Google image search of worship, you'll half of the images that you get will be indistinguishable from a rock concert, other than there might be like a cross somewhere up on stage. But our architecture even reflects that type of venue. And I think a caution in that is that we're mimicking an entertainment, an entertainment venue and entertainment style behavior, and yet worship is not to be entertainment. Worship is supposed to be something that's quite a bit different than that. That is, participatory, where the people in the the people who are in the seats are the ones that are actually actively performing this act of worshiping God, who is the unseen audience, rather than entertainers on a stage who are entertaining the audience that's seated in the seats.
Do you feel this is detrimental, or do you think it's beneficial, or is there something that we can take from those elements and apply them? And what's your thoughts on how that is for the days ahead for churches or for worship leaders?
I think that it's something that that we need to be cognizant of, and it's definitely a caution. And I mean, I'm the same. I mean, I'm a worship leader, and I'm center stage. The lights are pointing at me when I lead worship on a Sunday morning, and but to me, I have to remind myself that even though it's set up and looks like I'm the center of attention, that I am not the center of attention, and that my role and our role is to point people to the real star of the show, and that's Jesus. And but I think, I mean, I know I've had people audition or ask to audition for the worship team, and quite naively, they've said things like, "Well, I want to be on stage, and I want to hold a mic as their motivation." And so I think that is something that we need to be, we just have to be wise about the way we lead worship, so that we don't reinforce that misconception. Oh, there's a book, I can't remember the name of the author who wrote it, but and it was something like in the title was we are not rock stars. It was a book about worship leading, and dealt with this very issue. And there's a fine line for worship leaders between, I coach worship leaders to be, they have to be confident, and they have to be they have to be comfortable with the attention that they receive, but have the pastoral heart to direct that attention and focus to worshiping Jesus, who is, like I said, the real star of the show.
Exactly. A couple of weeks ago, we had Steve Bell on the program, and he was talking about humility in worship leading, and how we need to get out of the way so that the Lord can do his job through the Holy Spirit.
Well, I'd say absolutely. I'd say that what we see, we're modeling what we want our congregation to do on stage, and oftentimes it can be detrimental because we're not conscious of the fact that what we're doing on stage is projecting a certain image. So if we're modeling that spirit that says, I'm consulting with God before I do anything in my leadership for the congregation, we model that attitude of humility and that lack of celebrity. If we actually start to model that on our teams and demonstrate what that looks like to be a worshiper, and to just authentically come before God and to pour out your praise and worship on him, then people in the congregation will respond in kind. And I think that's where we get into trouble, because we don't realize that we're modeling something that people are mimicking back to us. And it starts to become, I'm showing you that I'm the star through the lighting and through the, the largeness of what I'm doing, and how I'm acting, and what I'm, even just what I'm doing with my body, what I wear and how I behave, is showing you what this is supposed to be about. And I think when we can speak into that to our congregation, we actually speak about what we're doing when we gather for worship. So a worship leader can be a teacher in that way, by speaking about, this is what we've come to do today: authentically worship God in spirit and in truth. And today we're going to forget about ourselves, and we're going to focus our attention on Christ and what he's done for us and who he is, and worship him in all of his glory. But I think we speak that message, and then we show another message by our behavior and by our attire and by our, trying to become the celebrities. And so we have to be very careful as worship leaders that we're constantly surrendering ourselves, surrendering our bodies, minds, and spirits to Christ.
I remember when I was leading worship, my mentor would say things like the small little things like, don't close your eyes when you're leading worship. And we thought, but aren't we supposed to be modeling that we're worshiping by by closing our eyes and raising our hands? And the actual feedback I got was, no, all you're doing is you're showing people what to do, but they're just watching you. You're just like a TV show at that point in time. And I actually tested it. So I closed my eyes, I raised my hands, and then I kind of did this kind of like peek just to see what was going on. And literally everyone just stood there and just stared. They did not engage. And it was a big lesson for me because, like you said, being a worship leader, and I was just a backup singer, to be honest with you, but being a face that faces the faces, it's very easy for all of us who are on that stage to kind of get lost into, oh, I'm modeling, I'm doing this for the Lord, and people are not interpreting what you're trying to teach, right? And so there's also this need to invite as well, which I don't know if you're seeing that, but that is something that I know I've learned is this need to invite people to come and join in the praise, not just watch the praise, but be part of the praise, which is interesting.
It's very cool.
I'm really intrigued with the assessment that Melissa and Geoff are bringing, like the rock star mentality. It's actually very true. The big five really influence. Now, I'm really curious to find out though, if do you think that worship teams are trying to mimic the big five, or are they trying to mimic maybe non-Christian bands? Are they trying to do that? Do you think that this is a way of being relevant to a younger audience? And the reason I'm asking those questions is simply because I know when we had the conversation with Stephen Lewis, he had an opposite mentality, which is very interesting. So before I share that, I want to hear what your thoughts are. Melissa and Geoff, welcome back. So what are your thoughts related to the why behind worship bands, if I can call them that officially, doing what they're doing now? Do you think they're trying to mimic the big five? Or do you think that they're trying to be relevant to maybe the mainstream music teams or music bands? What are your thoughts on that?
There is a prominence of these artists that have sort of dominated the scene, and somewhere along the way we've been told that these are the songs of the church. This is the repertoire now. You need to envelop this or you're not relevant. And if you don't actually lead these songs right now in this day and age, then where have you been? What are you doing? I actually was told by someone, there's a song that I didn't know. This was years ago when Hillsong first came on the scene, and somebody said, oh, have you heard the latest song? And I said, actually, no, I don't know that song. And she looked at me completely bewildered. Just, I can't believe you haven't heard this. And I was like, that's possible. It is possible for people not to actually listen to the same style of music for worship, because we come from different experiences. And so different backgrounds, different stages of life, different experiences in the church. And so different denominations. And so when we now say to every church, here are the songs, here is the repertoire for the church at large, there's a pressure for worship leaders to start pulling off those songs from the charts and saying, yeah, that is what we need to do. And then young worship leaders who are feeling that pressure start to immediately adopt it and think that this is the way, without doing that research of trying to being able to find other music of different styles from all over the world. It's sort of an understanding that this is where you need to go. If you want to find what you need to do as a worship leader, there's sort of like a unspoken manual of how to be a worship leader today. And it's prescribed for the students now, for the young leaders.
Wow. Geoff, do you see the same thing? Or do you see something
Yeah,
slightly
I definitely think that I mean, the students I see, they're immersed in these images of what a worship leader ought to be. And I saw that you're having someone from CCLI on soon, on next week, I think even.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
think I mean, CCLI has a lot to do with it. And in the old days, there was a hymnal committee that would put together a hymnal for your denomination, and those are your songs. A worship leader, you just pick songs from the church hymnal. But now we have the closest thing we have to that is the CCLI Top 25, which is it's a market driven thing. And so there's just this huge incentive with the amount of money that CCLI pays out in royalties for these worship leaders and the church like Bethel and the Big Five to market their songs. And so what works to market your songs? Well, a really slick social media presence and and managing that image, and it's that, I mean, it's following that entertainment industry model again, which has a huge influence on what ends up actually happening in churches on Sunday morning all around North America.
As I say,
Yeah,
what
go ahead,
happens
Cheryl.
with the churches with the older audiences?
Hmm. Hmm.
Do they feel,
Unfortunately, they're neglected. And in
wow,
this, I find that in this particular time, there are many from older generations that are crying out, and sometimes silently crying out, because they don't want to be seen as the old fuddy-duddies that are not with it. So they're standing in congregations, not participating. They're standing at the back or standing within, just kind of looking around and trying their best to engage, but feeling like they don't have a voice to express themselves. And I think that's a very difficult place to be in. I have people within my own family that are going to church and trying with all their heart to engage because they want to worship, but finding it so difficult because they don't speak the current language. And
right?
they're not given an opportunity to speak to God in their own authentic voice. And that sometimes comes from the music that you grew up listening to in adolescence. And for them, it's not
Yeah,
today's music. So they're finding it
right.
quite hard to adapt. And you'll find some that are, jumping on and doing what they need to do to get through the service. But how authentic is it for them? How does it speak to their
Hmm.
heart at that level? Or are they just trying to do what they need to do in the worship context?
Right, right.
Yeah, very
Um,
true.
Here's my next question. Where does the Canadian, I'm sure in the midst of all the music that's available, there are some music that's created by Canadian artists. Where do you think the Canadian music or praise and worship music fits in the dynamic of praise and worship and music for churches? Or does it fit at all?
That is a great question, and I mean, I think it's bigger than just church music. I mean, sort of how does one define the Canadian voice, and how does that voice speak as a worship leader or as a composer of worship music? And I think I mean, I think of sort of uh, the Canadian well-known worship leaders that I know, and ask myself, is there something distinctly Canadian about them? And boy, it's I honestly don't see the distinction. And so I can plead that we're supposed to be citizens not of this world. So maybe there, is there supposed to be an authentic Canadian voice? Um, yeah, that's a good question.
Well, the big challenge is a lot of artists feel they have to go to the States in order to get to a certain level. So that's I think that's the challenge. What can we what's with the Canadian situation?
Yeah, I
Go ahead.
think that what is uniquely Canadian about um, I- that sort of sets us apart as Canadians. What sets us apart, I think, is the desire to maintain culture versus that sort of US melting pot. We are the mosaic. And in Canada, the expressions of the people from all over the world landing in this country now, our music should reflect that. That would be typically Canadian, to have so many different types of expressions of worship in our Canadian context. But I think we're making the mistake of we're being more copyist, and we're actually trying to become what the US is doing, because it's a bigger market. Um, there's much more opportunity for based on the population alone, but there are
Right.
more opportunities for musicians
But that wouldn't
elsewhere.
that be because of would that be because of interests that's been given to them because of their platform, that everyone, not just Canadians, are looking at them and saying, "Well, look how well they're doing," and that would be the sense of, "Oh, maybe I should be doing that as well."
Yes, because we don't really do celebrity here.
No,
I think that's
no,
not really
it's
part
true.
of our Canadian culture. Celebrity is so much more found um, in other countries, but Canadians are, I think, more background people. We tend to not gravitate as much to that idea, that concept of celebrity, but we're attracted to it. So we don't grow
Hmm.
it here. It's not homegrown, but I think we're attracted to the idea of it. We want to be that, but we just don't have it here authentically. So I think we try to emulate that within our church services, and then it becomes maybe a less than authentic expression of who we really are.
Mhm.
So the students right now that are in the schools that are being trained and taught and mentored, when they finish and they have completed their degrees, what should they expect when they're leaving their schools to how to approach their vocation?
Well,
Jeff, do
that's
you
a
want to
great.
go?
I'm teaching a worship leadership course right now, and one of the things that we're doing, it's a fourth year sort of capstone course, and so one of the things we do is I get them ready to present themselves to churches to become worship pastors, and so we look at a variety of different styles of business, and they practice leading in liturgical style, in modern styles. And because I do, and I think we've been doing it a little bit here tonight, is we often tend to conflate the idea of the worship of the church with the what I call the worship industrial complex, which is the big five, CCLI, and their marketing and sort of the business side of selling worship music is a different thing than what happens in many churches on Sunday mornings. And so to prepare them for, they're not going to go be rock stars and, and perform on a concert, but they're going to lead worship to real people with real problems, and they're going to build their ministries with real people with real problems. And it's going to be much different than the idealized view that they get on it from the media and social media and these types of things. There certainly is, for most of my students, they they are, modern contemporary praise and worship is their sort of heart language for worship, and those are the styles of churches that tend to hire full-time or even part-time worship pastors. So they're expecting to go into that type of environment, but I do try to uh, expose them to different styles of churches and prepare them for coming to a church where there might be a traditional choir or a traditional service, and so that they have the skills and the experience to be able to lead worship in that situation. I had a student, not one of my worship students, but another student at the college this week who told me that he used a hymnal for the first time a couple weeks ago, and,
Hmm.
and he realized that you don't read it like a book. Like there were four verses. You don't just read the first line and the second line. You have to sort of skip
Okay.
to the next stanza, and that's the level of sort of
That's funny.
ignorance of any kind of worship outside of sort of the CCLI top 25 contemporary
Hmm. Hmm.
worship, where we read the words off of a video screen. We don't if I'm holding this book, how do I raise my hands in the air? I mean,
Yeah.
it's it's completely foreign to many of them, and yet many churches still are engaging in traditional worship.
That you said something
Yeah.
that's very interesting, that your students are preparing for um, like something separately. They're preparing to go into the churches to lead worship, but that's separate from the marketing side of worship or something like that. The way you said it, it made me want to ask this question: do any of your students ever get taught or encouraged to even create songs? Do they get to that next level where they not only are learning what's CCLI top 5 or top 20, or even how to work a hymnal, but do they learn the creative side as well for themselves, like how to, we're taught to sing in psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. Do they get taught or encouraged to do that as well?
At Tyndale, yes, they absolutely take a course in songwriting. And in this course, they're encouraged to write several songs throughout the semester. And they learn the process of songwriting. Many are interested in songwriting, but don't know how to go through the process. And so our songwriting professor guides them through writing songs for worship. And because we're a Christian university, it's not just writing songs in general, it's songs for the church. So students become accustomed to starting from zero and really being inspired by God and His Word, and taking thoughts and ideas from Scripture and putting them to music and composing their own lyrics and melodies. And then the best feature about this course is we get to use their songs in our chapel experience on Tuesdays. So many of the songs that come out of that course are used in our campus worship. So our chapel experience is for the entire campus to come together on a Tuesday morning, and we stop all courses and we all worship together in the chapel. And we've used over the years of the program, we've used many of the songs from our students, and especially now in a virtual setting. We are now online for our for education throughout the semester. So we do virtual chapels, and we have students that have made virtual videos of their pieces, and they'll collaborate. Vocalists will collaborate with a band member, somebody from the Tyndale band, and the Tyndale singers will collaborate and teach a song to our community so that we can learn something that has come from the heart of that student that God impressed upon them. And then in their final project as worship arts majors at Tyndale, they have the opportunity to lead their own song, and also to they're required to lead a choir, a band, and a congregation as their final project. It's like final recital for worship arts students. And they're actually required to lead a song in another language. And the
Wow.
idea
Wow.
was to get them to
That's
step
so cool.
outside of themselves,
Yeah.
because we get students that are
Wow.
so, as Geoff was saying, just so bogged down in this idea of mimicking and copying, that they're not used to having to get into the mindset and musicianship of a group of people that it's not from, not their own culture. So we really want the students to have an organic experience of stepping outside of what they're used to and immersing themselves in global ministry, because they may need to travel, they may become missionaries and have to lead in another country, and we want to prepare them for those opportunities as well.
Wow, that's really good, because I think they're talking about songwriting, Cheryl. Talking about songwriting.
Yes, they are. That's
That's
awesome.
great. I mean, it's something we've been encouraging in the GMIHub, as well as putting together our compilation CD, which is coming up 2022 Christmas, coming up really soon. And we do have a little video we can show you about that.
GMIHub is accepting new songs for their 2022 Christmas compilation. To find out how to submit your song, go to www.gmihub.ca today. GMIHub Family Christmas Volume 3. Ho, 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 ho.
It is coming up, and we want to encourage you to get your submissions in. GMIHub.ca. You go in there, you can find out how to submit your song. We'd love you to do that today. If you are an artist, or if you have a song you're working on, you can send us what is called an intent to submit. And that is what we already have sung. So I'm really excited to hear that earlier on in the show. We've got some people that are actually intending to submit, and that's fantastic. Can't wait to hear the stuff as it comes in. Our last 2 projects have been phenomenal. I'm excited about the next one. Really am.
It'll just get better and better each time.
Absolutely.
I just want to
Go
say
ahead,
I'm
Geoff.
teaching a songwriting course right now, so I'm going to tell my students about about this this compilation CD, and maybe you'll get a couple submissions from Briercrest.
That
Would
would
love
be
that.
awesome. That would be so
And
awesome,
Tyndale
Geoff.
too.
Yes.
Yeah, Michelle, tell your students about it too. We'd love to have that. That would be fantastic.
I will.
If for anything else, well, the GMIHub is about encouraging young artists to write and to produce and to do their craft well. And to have you be able to go to your students means a lot to us.
Oh, absolutely.
Yep, for sure.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better. So because we're talking worship and arts, right? So I want to hear the temperature gauge on this. If we were to consider possibly doing another compilation that may kind of sort of encourage writing praise and worship music from your students, you think they'd be interested?
Oh, I think they love that.
Maybe.
Yeah.
This is a temperature gauge.
We're just in the water on this.
For me, there'd be more interest in that than for me to convince my undergrads to write Christmas songs in February. It might be a tougher sell, but truly, only people in worship ministry can get excited in February, because if you've ever worked at a church with a big Christmas production, that's when you start the planning. So we get that.
That's right. That's right. That's okay. So we've talked about this. Now, what is your thought about churches? Now, am I correct in assuming that both your academic facilities are connected with the churches around as well? Like, do you have a relationship with the churches around you as well, or no? Am I correct in
For
that?
us, yes. We have a very strong connection to multiple churches surrounding the campus, and then also just connected to the whole city, because we have students that come from all over the city of Toronto. So every church that a student represents, we kind of develop these connections so that students can start populating those churches and having connections with them. And we also have very close relationships with the ones just immediately surrounding the campus. So from multiple, Tyndale is a multi-denominational university. So we have relationships with multiple denominations around the school.
Awesome. And what about with Briercrest, Geoff? Is it the same?
Yeah, we're the same, and we work hard to encourage our students in the fall to pick a church and commit to it and get involved and serve, rather than sort of just hop around to different churches and sort of never get connected. We have, we're a different situation than Tyndale. Most of our students come here and live on campus, and so. Whereas I think in a larger city, I think there's a lot more students who are already connected to a church who are just coming. But anyway, the same thing. We're a non-denominational school, but we have strong ties with all of the churches in our area.
Awesome. So based on your ties, how prepared do you think the churches are for your students?
That's a good question. Wow. I think that I would say, for representing Toronto, I would say that the smaller churches, as Geoff mentioned earlier, the larger churches tend to hire full-time worship leaders, worship pastors. In the smaller churches, there's an opportunity to enter a ministry and to grow as a leader, whereas the larger churches tend to want years of experience leading a larger congregation. So coming right out of university as a worship leader in training in a 4-year program, our students are sometimes nervous about taking on a position in a large church of a couple thousand people, or somewhere around that size. So they tend to gravitate towards smaller churches. So they look for postings and opportunities to grow their leadership in a smaller church first. So I think sometimes it depends on the type of student. If we have very confident students who feel passionate about leading larger churches, the churches are calling us constantly. I get calls all the time. Do you have a team to send us? Can you send us a team of musicians to lead, because churches are hungry for beautiful music and a way of expressing ourselves to God in that way and musically. So I think churches are anxious to have our students come and share their ministry and have our students lead their music ministries. It's up to us to sort of be guided in that process to help align a student with a church that suits their sensibilities, and sometimes it's denominational questions, sort of aligning a student with the denomination that they're used to or that they grew up in. But sometimes it's complete departure, and students need to just launch themselves into a new ministry. We have a student one of our international students from Trinidad, just graduated last year and stepped into a position with a church of several thousand in Minnesota, and now he's the primary worship leader there. Um,
Wow.
and that sort of was comfortable for him from where in the training that he received at Tyndale and in his experiences over the years and what God was implanting on his heart. He felt led to take that opportunity. So I think churches are ready, they're eager, and they want to see what the students have to offer and what they can bring and how they can enrich the music ministry. But sometimes it takes some work to pair the student in the right position and to set them up for a successful music ministry.
I mean, I look at my role as more preparing my students for the church, and rather than having like, it's not the church's job to get ready for students. And for me, as someone training worship leaders, it's I have fallen down on the job if I haven't prepared my students for what the church is like out there. And I
Right.
have, I mean, I share all of my battle scars and horror stories with my students about what real life in the trenches church ministry can be like,
Mhm.
and yet with the same, like, I love the church, and I totally believe that that's God's plan A, and there is no plan B, and that there's nothing as rewarding as real church ministry. And so I mean, I just look at it from the other side, thinking, the question I ask is, are my students ready for real church
Mhm.
ministry? Are they ready to lead worship with love and compassion to to real people with real problems, and to come in with humility and an attitude that they are there to serve, that they're not there to, as the trained professional, to set things straight for this church that doesn't know what they're doing, but just to come in to love and serve whatever congregation God leads them to. And for some, they aspire to a large church with all the challenges um, and the amazing blessings of working with a large church. And others are turned off by a mega church. I mean, half my students, they would say, when they say mega church, it's sort of a term of derision, and they much prefer, and they feel like there's more authentic connection and real ministry can take place in a smaller church. And uh, and so I try to get all of my students to see that God made churches in all different shapes and sizes, and there's not Acts 2, the first church started out with 3,000 members, so that's a pretty good sized church, and yet there are lots of little house churches too. So size isn't really the issue.
Right, right. I find that ironic, Geoff, when you say that, because, the students are gravitating to smaller churches, but yet the music they want are all from the big five, which are all mega churches, which is so interesting.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
there's a
Geoff.
tension there where they long for that intimacy and that connection, and yet they're attracted to this arena style worship leading environment with the lights and the pyro and the 100-foot video screens, and a lot of those contradictions are just inherent in our culture, and we're dealing with them at every level, not just at church worship. And
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think a challenge for us as worship leaders uh, is to remember that that's not the problem we're trying to solve. We're trying to point people to Jesus, and there are lots of
Right.
different ways to do that.
That's right. That's right. Using what you said earlier at the beginning of the show, that there's an image of the rock, wanting to have the rock person image, when really what we're doing is trying to point people to the rock, the rock
Yeah,
that is
yeah,
higher than I, as is said in one of
yeah,
the
exactly.
songs that I've heard.
I like
you
the
know?
image that he was talking about when bringing the people into a posture of servanthood, and not as a look what I can do,
Yes.
but more like what can I do for you. And I think that's the
Yes.
key. Brian Dirksen mentioned that it's just in the gaps, finding the opportunities that were needed, and that's how he started writing his music, because it was some of necessity, because there was a place in the service that needed a song and things like that. So I appreciate that posture coming into a new position at a church, because there's so many things that churches may not know they need until someone comes in and says, "Oh, you know what? This is a need I think I can fill."
Yeah. I have two more questions, and Dale probably will follow up with the third one. Two more questions. One question, I'm going back to the concept of encouraging your students to songwrite. And I love the fact that I think, Melissa, you said that you do this, or not you, but Tyndale does this. You encourage your students to write the music, and then and then have them share it, not just to their
Mm.
class, but to their oh, I forgot the word you used, but when everyone gets together to do a
The
praise and
whole
worship.
community. Yes.
Yes, right. Um, and from what I understand, like from what I gathered, that just happens in the Tyndale um, program, correct?
Yes, that's built into the program.
Right.
Mm.
So
So students are sharing, yes.
they're sharing, and Geoff, now you said you teach songwriting too. Now, is it something similar or something different?
It sounds quite similar, and we also have. I've had some of my students who have shared their songs in the chapels that we have throughout the week, and often we have a student run worship time on Sunday nights that's a lot more informal, and they get together and worship for like a couple hours. So a lot of songs that they've written are introduced there, and I'm listening, and I have a few worship leaders who want to be singing their songs, and so that can be, I try to guide them through that in a healthy way, and usually we'll say, well, let's try it on a Sunday night, or try it once, and let's see what the response is. And if lots of people respond really well, then okay, well, let's do it again, and see if we have something that resonates with our community. And I mean, I also teach recording arts, so I get to hear lots of songs that students are writing, and some of them are just writing such inspiring, heartfelt worship songs, and I've been encouraging them to get involved with the chapel worship teams, and to share them, and that's something that I want to do, more and more of. And I think it is important for one way to sort of break out of the the grip that the worship industrial complex has on some of our churches, is to intentionally try to sing our own songs, and
Yes.
and maybe they aren't as slick as the songs that have the Nashville co-writing team and production team, but they're authentically from us, from our community, in this moment in our life, and I just think that's really important, and I want our community to be singing our songs.
Mm.
Yes. I thank you for saying that, Geoff, because that's basically our heart too. And I don't mean
Yeah.
just the community, but like our community is all of Canada, right? And if it
Yeah.
goes beyond that, awesome, right? But and you were leading right into my next question, which was basically, it's, not only the mentoring of those students with their music, which I'm glad both of you have said your schools do, which is awesome. I think it's so awesome that you're doing that. Um, it's now, when I talked about the churches, is hopefully the churches as well, seeing that's usually their next step is to go into a church environment, would also be open to hearing this new music as well. Because one of the things that's on our heart right now is encouraging Canadian artists to um, authentically express their worship to God as well, and allow others to hear that, allow others to identify with that, and and maybe that will cause other people to lift a praise and worship. I mean, you never know. um, I know Dale mentioned when we had Steve Bell and Brian Dirksen on, one of the things that they basically said was they wrote songs as out of their, and actually John Chisholm said it too, they wrote songs out of their expression of love to God. It was this is what the song was for. And then they so happened to share it, with a group of people, or when they were leading service, and they never anticipated their song to go beyond the walls of the church they shared it with, but they ended up going beyond those walls. And one of the things that we'd love to see is um, artists, young artists like the students that you're training up, to share their music not only with the community within the schools, but to share it with the churches they go to, and then that it gets shared beyond that as well. And who knows, maybe some of them will get on the CCLI list. Who knows?
Yeah, I agree with you. Would there be a way that we could maybe be interested in letting those students know that not only would you be able to present your music to the congregation you're currently involved with, but to share that with the community church down the street, or the other church that you have in contact with, or the worship leader of, is there that network that we could actually take this music and make it more available to more more church congregations?
Yes, I think one of the things that we emphasize in Tyndale's program is to have traveling musicians. We set up a system where our ensembles travel to various churches throughout the city to share music, and sometimes that will involve the music that they have written themselves. But we encourage authentic expressions of worship. And I think that's where it begins, going back to
Yes.
Matt Redman's thought about when the music fades and all is stripped away, and I
Mhm.
simply come
Yes.
back to the heart of worship, which is, God, how do you want us to worship you? What do
Come
you
on,
want
yeah.
us to worship? And not asking first, let's see if I can examine the top 40 for some ideas, but first going to God Himself in prayer by yourself as a worship leader and saying, what do you want to say to your people this week, Lord? What do you want to say through me that I can um, share with your congregation? How can you use me so that I can bless your heart, but also bless the hearts of the people that you've called me to serve? So I think oftentimes for me as a worship leader, I am always trying to go back to, why am I doing this? What did God call me to do in the first place? God called me to lead His people faithfully and as a servant for His people, um, and and sing about Him, show people who He is through
Mhm.
song. So I think that I always have to sort of drop my plans and weigh them against, what is God saying? What is God speaking to
Yeah.
us? And how can we start there? And that music that comes out of that space will be authentic, will be from our context, because worship is often in a cultural context. And so within this Canadian context, what is God saying to us here for our city at this time to His
Mhm.
people? And as we explore that, beautiful things can come from there. And so we're always encouraging our students to go back to God as the source.
I mean, COVID has made many things difficult, and sharing, getting groups traveling around and sharing music is one of those things that there hasn't been much of in the last couple of years. One thing that my wife and I had this grand plan to have students over a few times a semester. We were going to call it New Music Nights, and we've got a piano upstairs in our living room. And whenever I have students over, they always end up grabbing one of my guitars, and another one gets at the piano, and they're playing music. And as a way to encourage the students to be writing new material, was to just, we wanted to have students over, and the premise would be that for take an hour and we're going to worship together, and the only rule is it has to be something new that you have written, that's that's come from your heart. And we had this all ready to go, and then and so I haven't been able to, with all, been able to do that. But it is it's something that really does. I mean, I'm glad that you guys are have that burden, because it's such hard work to write to write songs, to write good songs. And it doesn't happen without that intent, and without that focus, and that commitment to take the time and to create something new, and something that's true, and an authentic expression of something beautiful and as mysterious as our relationship with God is.
Yeah, that's great. And let me just encourage you both. Instead of maybe thinking the traveling band concept, there's also what you're teaching is also recording as well. So I was thinking that maybe there's a way you could take that and send it to other churches and say, look, this is what we are doing, and if you like this, maybe you could use it in your congregation as well. It makes it a little easier for because we're in the times that we're in, to be able to share that music. So anyway, that's just an encouraging, hopefully you'll be encouraged by that. Something to think about.
And I was just about to say, and technology is in the midst of what COVID has brought to us. One of the things that has really excelled is the use of technology, and we even took advantage of it. That's why you're here on GMIHub Online. We took advantage of this as well, and we're looking for ways to really support artists. We want to support artists. We want to give them a platform, and if using this kind of a platform is one way to help encourage students, young artists like the ones you are developing in your programs, or even those who are probably not in your programs, but they have the heart to write and to express that love they have for Christ, or have that authentic worship that they'd love to share. I mean, that is something that is on our hearts that we would love to be a part of as well. So I know we're a little bit over, but my one question I was going to ask you is, based on um, what you know with your students and what we've discussed, what would be your forecast on praise and worship in Canada? What do you think praise and worship will look like in Canada in the next 3 years? Pretty much the same.
It's a tough one to. I mean, the internet is forever. So if I make a prediction and it's wrong, I'll never live it down with my students. But here's what I hope.
Okay, what do you hope? Maybe I should ask that. Well, how would you hope it would be
better
like?
way, yeah.
I hope that that the new music being written will facilitate and encourage the involvement of the congregation. I hope that we will get back to that as a priority, and I want to continue. I think contemporary worship music has matured so much in the last 30 years. I mean, if you look at what was out in the 90s versus the depth of the expressions and the creativity, the fresh images that we see, I hope that continues, and also get to a place where there is a simplicity that is still beautiful and draws in the whole community, the whole congregation, to make the participation of God's people the priority. That's my hope.
Yes, I would definitely echo what Geoff is saying, and also to add that I think I would love to see an authentic yet diverse expression of worship to God from his people from all over the world. I think sometimes we get stuck in one particular style of music that doesn't represent all the people of the world. and everything that God has, all the beautiful music that comes from the various cultures of the world, are underrepresented, I find, in contemporary worship music now. And I'd love to see people authentically express themselves with their heart language to God, through multiple ways of expressing ourselves culturally to God. It could be through instrumentation changes. It could be through language. It could be through expression, freedom of expression in church congregations based on the various cultures that are represented. But I love to see a more diverse expression of worship to God, whether that also involves generational diversity, right? So the music, I think I'd love to see our music of the church be cover the full expanse of God's people and represent their heart language.
Yeah.
Well, both of you have expressed our hearts when
Absolutely.
it comes to praise and worship music, and what we would like to see as well. I think if I could add to what you say, I'd say GMIHub would love to see more authentic worship coming from the artists that are here in Canada. And as you said, Melissa, authentic to even, I love how you said it, and I don't think I can say it the way you said it now, but authentic to their own worship language to God, how they worship. And I'd love to see that go right across. I mean, Geoff, I'm almost jealous of you in the sense of I wish I could be like a fly on the wall in your house when you have all those students there and just having that authentic worship time. Like, I'd love to hear that, you know, and also you, Melissa, when you have your students there writing. I mean, when there are groups that can take that time to make music and praise to God a priority, it's just a beautiful thing that I think God is just pleased with. I mean, hey, he loves music. He created it, right? Exactly. It was his in the first place. So, Geoff, Melissa, thank you so much for being with us and sharing your perspectives. I tell everybody, round of applause for all of you who are watching. Round of applause to them for sharing their thoughts and sharing their heart. I mean, and I thank you as well for what you are doing in your schools and colleges, universities. I get it all mixed up, but I love what you guys are doing, and keep it up to you and your staff that are with you. Keep bringing up those young people. And we're looking forward. Let them know that we are looking forward to hearing their music come out. We're looking forward to it. Yeah. So I will. Thank you again.
Yes, I will too. Thank you.
Yeah. Bless you both.
Yeah, thanks for having us, you guys.
Thank you for having us.
Now, don't run away. Don't run away.
Yeah, just hold on.
But audience, we want to also say thank you to you for joining us in this conversation. I hope you learned a lot from this. I hope that what was expressed encouraged you and encouraged your churches. If you really enjoyed this conversation, go ahead, share the like button, or share the like button, click the like button and share the experience. Share the link. This is going to stay on YouTube. It's for free for you to review if you'd like to review it. Also, if you're on our channel, if you haven't subscribed yet, please go ahead and subscribe. And so you can be one of the first people to know when we are broadcasting another great conversation like this one. As was mentioned by Geoff, actually, we are next week going to have CCLI with us to share how they influence and what their part is within the music industry, how they help artists and some of the new services that they are offering, both to artists and to churches. So we look forward to that as well. And we may have another guest on. We're not sure yet, but we may have another guest on that will also share something similar along with that too. So we hope you tune in with us next week. But for now, we'd love to say thank you, God bless, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Yeah. Please go to our website, www.gmihub.ca, to find out more about us. God bless.
God bless.
Are you writing a Christmas song? Do you want it on our Christmas CD? This year, Send us your song for your chance on the CD. Submission deadline July 31st, 2022. Family Christmas Volume 3. Christmas 2022.